Okay, so we're talking to Bill Mitchell, and question for you, Bill, before we start the interview. If you are what you eat, what are you?
Hmm. Does drink enter into it?
Sure. What do you drink?
Um, Lately, Bloody Marys.
Mm.
Bloody Marys. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A
I
little
don't know. It's
celery,
it
tomato.
exactly an olive, lime, not lemon,
Mm-hmm.
and not so much because of the booze part of it at all. It's just I just happen to like tomatoes and sometimes salty things. So I'm a fool for that, and just one will do. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I used to drink Bloody Mary mix even when I was a kid on the plane.
same.
That was I
I
would
did
just
too.
get it over ice, and that was like a drink that I really liked to have for the same reasons that you just said.
Yes, you get a
Yeah.
little can of Mrs. T's or whatever that stuff
Yes.
was called. I don't know what
Yeah.
it's called. It's been
I
too
think that's
long.
what it was called. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Ah,
all I needed. I was good.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that.
Sure.
I am Laura Cathcart Robbins. This is the only one in the room, but I'm never the only one in this room because, as usual, my boyfriend, producer, and co-host Scott Slaughter, who I call Hun, is here as well.
Hi, honey.
Hey, honey. So we are talking to author, speaker, and advocate Bill Mitchell, whose book When Dating Hurts tells the story of how he lost his daughter, Kristin, to dating violence. And again, Bill, thank you so much for coming onto the show. This is such an important topic, and I have a lot of questions to ask you. But I wanted to start. First of all, I always ask all our guests, how do you identify before we start the interview?
I'll go with he, him, Bill. I
Yeah,
think that's it.
that's great. That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
So the email that I got from you said, "My name is Bill Mitchell. My daughter was murdered by her ex-boyfriend in 2005. It was 20 days after her college graduation. A parent's worst nightmare was ours for the remainder of our lives."
Yeah.
Um, and I really just have to tell you that while I was preparing for this, reading your book, which is right here next to me, When Dating Hurts, you inscribed it to me. Hi, Laura. It is my heartfelt hope that reading this memoir will bring greater awareness to dating violence to those who need it most than
Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
And I got to tell you, I mean, I don't know if I'm one who needs it the most, but it really brought, I was in my feelings when I read your memoir. It was really, I have two boys, they're 22 and 24. Scott has two girls. I call them my bonus daughters.
Wow.
They're
Nice.
18 and 22.
It's very nice.
And it was very difficult to read this and make it about you.
Mm.
I kept making it about me. I kept drawing these parallels in our lives. So I just wanted to say that kind of at the top because I stayed in that state for about, I don't know, probably about a day afterwards, just kind of reverberating in the feelings that you describe so well in your book. And I'm going to let you talk about it in just a second. I just wanted to start you off by saying that Kristin had just graduated from college when she was murdered. And we're all coming up to graduation time again.
That's
Um,
right.
yeah, Scott's daughter Lily will be graduating on May 7th.
Mm.
My son's girlfriend is graduating in the same class. And then his other daughter Nora is graduating from high school
Mm.
all this spring. So this is all happening in real time for us. But Kristin had just graduated from college. She was murdered by her ex boyfriend, who you call Nick in the book, because I understand that you rather not use his real name.
I never
Um,
use his real name. Yes.
yeah. I know you were there for her graduation, but can you tell us how you found out that she'd been murdered? Tell us that story.
Yes. Well, the way I found out to answer just that part for you was that I had gone through an entire Friday, June 3rd, 2005. It was art directed by Hollywood from the standpoint that it rained all that day,
Hmm.
and now it was in the evening and it was dark. It was like 8 or 9 o'clock, which if the weather were better, it'd probably be fairly nice out here. But it was raining, and So yeah, I was driving. I had just left my parents at a restaurant, and I received a call from a woman, and it was a police detective, lieutenant, and she told me she needed to tell me something, and I had a lot of thinking to do. I'm driving along, it's raining, the windshield wipers are going, and I'm thinking, okay, I got a police person talking to me. I've got a woman detective. Not that that couldn't happen, but that was a little more to chew on. It's like
Mhm.
sometimes I say to people, when you hear male nurse, it takes a moment,
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, who is this person? And the other part of it was that in the trinity of things to process was I said, well, what are you calling me about? And it was, well, I can't tell you over the phone.
Mm.
And we've been to your house several times and no one was there. No one was there. So I found out at a grocery store. I picked a grocery store because I thought if this person shows up and it's some crazy person, who just wants to single me out and break my kneecaps or something, I don't know. I
Mhm.
thought I'll do it at least where people might be. So she pulled up in a silver Honda, and she got out, and then this great big guy got out who was wearing a suit. Turns out he was another detective, and then two more people got out of another car. I got four people walking up to me. The other two turned out to be bereavement counselors,
Mm.
and so she said, "Well, do you want to sit in my car and let me talk with you?" Even though I saw badges, I thought I'm not getting in anybody's car because I'm not trusting anything tonight.
Yeah.
So anyway, I said, if you're going to tell me something, just why don't you just tell me here? So that's where I got the words, Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry to inform you, your daughter was murdered earlier today
Mm.
by her boyfriend. So yeah,
Right. Um,
yeah, just
what
like that.
what just like that. And it's really it's fascinating to read your accounting of that and how it went. And I know you were at like the giant supermarket, right?
It was, yes,
Yeah. And I didn't establish this at the beginning. You were in Maryland,
yes, yes. We were
right?
outside of Maryland. Yes, we
Okay.
were outside
And
of Baltimore in Maryland.
Baltimore, yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
And then Kristen was had just gotten an apartment in Philadelphia.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. In an area called Dresher, Pennsylvania. She went to
Drescher.
school
Okay.
at St. Joseph's University to the west of Philadelphia, and then farther out from that was Drescher. She was going to be starting soon. Okay, her apartment was in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. She was going to start at General Mills at Drescher, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
So
right.
she was in another state, but not very far away.
She was about 125 miles away, which
125 miles.
which to
Wow.
go and see her, you had to plan a little bit. So
Yes.
it
Yeah.
wasn't the biggest deal, but I mean, you just didn't see her every weekend. So
Right. Did you have an inkling? Like I know if I got anything suspicious, I would immediately check on all my loved ones. If I got a suspicious call or something, I would call like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay?" Did you have an inkling when they called that it might be
me,
Kristen?
no, not at
No.
all. No, didn't
No.
occur to me at all. The only thing I thought about was I thought that someone on our street, someone on our cul-de-sac in this development that I'm in right now still, I thought maybe something really awful happened and
Mhm.
that they were tracking down everybody on the street to ask questions about, do you know of anything about this thing? Or, I didn't have a clue.
Right.
And I I called my wife, and she was at a graduation party with my son near Washington. And I knew I would never get her because her phone was figured tucked away in a purse or
Sure.
handbag
Yeah.
and wouldn't hear it. So I called my son, talked with him. He walked the phone over to her. And then she said, well, is it about Kristen?
Mm.
So even though
Mhm.
I didn't have any of that instinctual stuff, she definitely did.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why would it be about Kristen? These are local police calling me. These aren't Philadelphia police calling me.
Right.
Well,
Right.
what I did know is, of course, the Philadelphia police, detectives, everybody up there was checking around here to basically track us down. And they
Yeah.
happened to catch up with me first. Had my wife and son not been at that party, they would have been home and these detectives would have gotten to them before me.
Right. Yeah, because you had
Any other
mentioned
night of
they
the week. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I was just gonna say, you mentioned they had come by your house several times.
Yes, they said they
Yeah,
had. Yes.
yeah.
And they wanted to meet me here at the house. And I just thought, nah,
No,
it's a
yeah,
dark, seriously dark and rainy evening. And I just thought, I don't know what's going to happen outside of my house if I pull up. So
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. But
Ye
I will tell you just one thing on a point
mm,
you made,
yes,
which is the book kind of you kind of found yourself in the book.
yes.
When the book two things. When the book was first written, it was written, and you have to process this for a second. It was written in the second person. So the
Okay.
book that you read, which is the book, was written in the
Mhm.
first person. And of course,
Yes.
there's the third person. So the first person is I say I, and I say we, and I say us. And I was walking down the street and I went to my house. And then, of course, third person would be Bill was walking down the street and he then went into his house.
Mhm.
Second person, and I wrote 100 pages before I stopped this and then changed it, was you're walking down the street and you go into your house.
Right.
That's the way I wrote it because I wanted so badly for the reader to become me and see the whole world through my eyes.
Mm.
I wanted to take you with me. I didn't want to let you go. And I wanted to kind of, if you would stay with the book, force you to see it the way I saw it. And I wanted the book to portray this as being such an emotional upheaval and be so painful that if you're a parent reading it, you're saying the whole time, oh my God, I never want this to happen to my family.
Yeah, yeah.
So what can I do? And in the end of the book, at the very end, then you see all kinds of things about warning signs, and the book becomes
Yes.
much more of a straight general information. But so what happened is I shifted it because some people said, I don't get this you thing you're doing. They just,
Mm.
my friends told me, my wife told me too, who's my friend.
Yes.
Uh, but I resisted it for the longest time. And then finally, I had enough people who I believed in who said, Bill, let this thing go. Just write it in the first person. So, but I
Mm.
think I still achieved what I set out to do by
You
doing that. I
did.
mean, you're telling me that. So
Yeah, it's very powerful. It's extremely powerful, and everything that you said that you intended for the reader to experience, I did. So you
good.
definitely hit your goal.
Yeah. One of
Um,
the other things
yeah.
too, just quick, I just do this quickly
Mm.
because I know you have questions,
Yeah.
but stylistically, I set out in the very beginning to write it, and I hope I did, write it with what I would call the energy of a novel.
Mhm.
Because I figured if this comes off as a boo-hoo piece, I've called it for years, if it's a big, oh, everybody feels sorry for Bill and his family piece, that gets old after a while. You're not going to make it through 300 pages if it's just, hey, feel sorry for me. Then this happened. Ooh, that's bad. Feel sorry for me.
Yeah.
So I tried not to close the loop that way with people. So I wanted them to feel things as they came along and decide for themselves how they felt about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, it definitely has that true crime feel. That's how it
good. Well,
reads.
I mean,
Yeah.
I know it's a bit of a manipulative thing to do. I was in
Uh,
advertising, by the way, my whole career. I was a creative guy. So the
yeah.
idea of grabbing people's attention and then rewarding them for staying around, you have to, or they won't even make
Yes.
it through a 30-second TV spot.
Right. Right.
So I knew I had to keep, and that's another thing too, is why I kept my chapters short so that you go, oh, we're on to the next thing. Oh, we're
Mhm.
on to the next thing. That book has literally 140 chapters in it.
No, and they're very short. They're very short.
Yeah.
Um, so just to remind our listeners, Nick is the name that you've given to Kristen's ex-boyfriend, but it's not his actual name, but I'm going to use it for the purpose of this interview. The first time you met him was at her graduation, is that correct?
First time, yes.
Yeah, so 20 days before she was murdered, that's the first time you met her murderer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're introduced, we shake hands. I'm taking pictures of him with Kristen. He's taking
yeah.
pictures of us with Kristen and all kinds of stuff. And in the following week, exchanging emails, sharing pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What was your impression of him?
Well, that's interesting because my initial impression, not anticipating anything, is when I first shook his hand and I looked at him, I thought, these words, and you saw them in the book, I'd never want to tangle with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
immediately thought of being in a fight with him.
Sure.
And he looked what I call gym rat tough. I mean, he looked like a guy who knew how to work the weight benches and all this stuff. And he's a few inches taller besides and much younger. But I don't think I've met too many people in my life that I immediately picture
Mm-hmm.
physically having an altercation. And I did
Wow.
with him. Yeah, it wasn't good
No,
at
yeah,
all.
that was some premonition of yours.
I should have
Tell me,
followed.
he gave her a graduation present. What was that?
Yes, well, she was moving into a new apartment, and he did have a good ability to cook. So he knew a lot about cooking and chefing and whatever. And so, yeah, he bought her one of those wooden blocks with kitchen knives in it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
because what I found out later in your book was that she was stabbed 55 times. Is that correct?
Yes, she was
Yeah.
stabbed or
She was
slashed, and
or
many of them were
slashed.
in her back, which the detectives and the prosecutor said clearly she was trying to get away.
Yeah. Yes. And the other thing that you mentioned your wife and your son, but one of the things that comes across really powerfully in the book is how close the four of you are. That it was for years it was you and your son and your wife. Do you mind if we say their names?
No, of course not.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So yeah, David and Michelle and
Yes.
Kristin and you were like this foursome. I think you were admired by other families for being this very, and in your relationship with Kristin, as it goes through the book, you can see how close you were. So you were the foursome for all those years, and then all of a sudden they're three. How did you all get through those first few weeks?
Well, we became a really tight unit without ever having to, we didn't talk about like, wow, we really have to stick together. I mean, we had this project ahead of us starting that night that we learned into the next day of having to go to interview funeral homes and literally look at caskets and make decisions and go to graveyards and all this kind of stuff that you never want to do ever. And
Hmm.
but we just somehow we just fit together even better than ever and could practically finish each other's sentences. And I remember thinking this happened on a Friday night, but it was somewhere around Monday evening. Now we couldn't do the funeral right away because her body was held as evidence for a number of days.
Mm.
So she died on a Friday, well, very early in the morning on a Friday. We didn't learn till Friday night. She wasn't buried till Thursday of the following week, so 6 days later. But I remember at one point late on Monday evening saying, I can't believe how well we're all getting through this. I mean, we were just had such clarity, all three of us, in our minds. My son was 17 back then.
Mm.
He's now twice that. But um, everybody just seemed to know what to do,
Yeah.
not what to do, how to do it, how to support each other, because you just haven't practiced that before in under these circumstances. So
No, no,
uh,
and
I
no,
we
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
circled the wagons. No, circled the wagons like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I bring this up then because, I mean, at this point in the interview, because at that point, you all didn't really know the specifics of what had happened, correct? You knew some of it, but you didn't know all of it.
Well, okay, when you say specifics, how to be more specific?
Um,
Yeah.
the well, the timeline of what had happened. Did you know that in those first few days of what had
Um,
happened with Kristen and Nick?
a lot of the information came soon. I mean, that evening, that the evening that I talked with these detectives, and then I did sit in this female detective's car,
Hmm.
Vicky, and I spoke with the lead detective at that time in Philadelphia, and he told me a fair amount, even though it was still only like a matter of hours later. I mean,
Right.
she was killed around 3 a.m. The police didn't know until about 9 a.m. and now it's about 9 in the evening, 12 hours later.
Yeah.
But still, in a case like that, it's pretty early. Um, but I had a fair amount of information. They had already caught up with this guy and interviewed him, and
Well,
I
and he
think,
had gone to the ER.
yeah. So what happened was it seems like he did what he did at around 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And, um, and so what happened, even though he brought the fury that he did, as you mentioned, the number of times that she was stabbed or slashed,
Mm-hmm.
but she did not die immediately.
Mm.
It seems from his recollection of what happened, and I don't trust the guy very much at all, but in this case, the fact that he said she probably lingered as much as 45 minutes.
Wow.
So, I kind of take that as maybe that really did happen. But then after that, he spent really the next 3 hours or so just figuring out his plans. What is he going to do? He even took a shower, changed clothes, and created a story that it was a self defense situation. And then he actually created evidence by cutting himself, and um, and then somewhere along the line called his siblings,
Right.
and they both said, "Well, if you're injured that badly, you better get to the hospital." And so he called another girlfriend, as it turns out, an ex-girlfriend from some time before that, who came to the apartment, took one step in, saw some of what was in there, and took one step out. And it's like, I'm not going in there. So she helped him one way or another get to the hospital. And when he
Mm-hmm.
got in there, he talked about what happened, and they asked, "Well, what happened to the other person?" And he said, "Well, she's in the apartment, and I think she's dead." And
Right.
so it seems like uh, admitting nurses in hospitals must have a floor switch or some kind of a switch they can hit that tells the police inside there, "Get over here right now." And so they got
Mm-hmm.
him. And then they got local police, and then they got the detective who I actually spoke with later that day to come in. And
Mm.
so they put him in the ER, and they had to attend to him. And the fact that he had a fairly serious cut on his neck, which he claimed he tried to kill himself.
Mm.
And in the end, the medical examiner could never really talk about that, because by the time the medical examiner caught up with him, he was already stitched up by the ER doctor. So whether that
Right.
was self done or not, no one will ever really know except the guy that did it. So
Mm.
yeah,
So this was an unfathomable, violent attack, and the attacker is now in custody at this point in your story. Why
yeah.
why didn't you all want to see it go to trial?
Uh, there were a number of reasons. I would say at the top of the list was that if you have a really if you have a really firm grip on what premeditated murder is, we didn't think this was that. Even though it was 55 wounds, it seemed like it was fairly continuous. And there's no way, we believe, nor did the prosecutor, that he went there with an intent to kill anybody. Now, premeditated murder is a very tricky area,
Mm-hmm.
because you could be in a situation where something's happening, and then there's a there's a period of time when there's nothing happening. You're breathing heavily, like, what the heck just happened? And then you decide to kill someone, and you do. That is premeditated murder. But we never heard anything that was convincing enough to feel that it was. Okay, so now you have a guy in this case who's willing to step up to what's called in Pennsylvania third degree murder. And third degree is not first degree premeditated, nor is it not second degree. Second degree murder would be as if, let's say, I went into a bank to rob a bank, and on the way out of the bank, I shoot security people, and kill them. That would be second degree. So second degree murder is murder committed in the midst of a felony, but it seems like the person who did it didn't go to kill. They went to
Right.
commit a felony. For
Right.
instance, a rape situation. Somebody rapes somebody, but it gets out of hand and they wind up killing them. That's second.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And so you have premeditated, you have second, and third. The way they put it is it's murder. It's just not first or second. So
Yeah.
this went down. This looked like it would go to third. Okay. Now, the reason we did this was this. For number one, we couldn't get premeditated. We didn't believe, at this house at least. And I don't think the prosecutor did. Secondly, you have a guy pleading to third. So he's willing to plead to murder, guilty of murder, and he would get, in the bad part, 15 to 30 years. So if you do the math, this happened in 2005, and
Mm-hmm.
2020 already passed. So he already did his 15. And then there are parole board hearings, or actually they're called parole board reviews. A hearing means there's a judge present. I have to correct myself.
Yeah.
Parole board hearings are annual, and well, anyone within certain parameters, anyone can participate
Mm-hmm.
in these reviews, but they are annual. It's an annual heart attack, and
Mm.
so they decide every year. So the first year they decided you'll at least do one more year, and then the second year they decided you'll do at least a year and a half, and and that's the way it goes.
Wow.
And then if in fact he is still in at year 30, then unless he has some kind of infractions against him in prison, then they'll release him.
Mm-hmm.
13 years from now.
Okay. Um, at his sentencing, he said, "My words aren't significant enough, but that's all I ever think about. Every single day, every minute, every second, every hour. I loved her." And in response to that, in the book, you say, "I sense this coming from his heart. This man will likely be locked away for no less than 15 years, likely longer. A cinder block hell. What a miserable future he made for himself." What was this, you finding compassion for him? Was that what I was reading there?
I did, but I got over it really quickly.
Mm.
No, I got swallowed up in it. I think what happens is when something this devastating takes place, this life changing takes place, that you're thinking you want to hold on to anything. You can't have her. He knew her. He liked her. I guess in his mind he loved her. Um, he had a lot of baggage. He would not have been good for her had they gone on at all. But
Yeah.
I got caught up in what he said up there. I guess I wanted to hear certain things, and I did. And so when that plea and sentencing hearing was over with, and my wife and I and my son also got up and spoke, I was standing outside and I talked with some reporters. It was in a hallway, and when I was finished, the prosecutor who had been handling the case all along virtually spun me around and shook her finger in my face and told me, "Don't believe a word that," in effect, she didn't say it this way,
Mm.
but don't believe a word that comes out of his mouth. And I realized at that moment, oh my God, I've been manipulated like he manipulates everybody else.
Yeah.
I mean, I fell
Yeah.
prey, and I don't feel the least bit sorry for this guy at all.
Mm.
But I had about a half an hour of it, but I got over it, and thank God the prosecutor kind of like verbally slapped me around to wake me up. She did me a
Mm-hmm.
huge favor. She's absolutely right. I have no forgiveness for this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what you know our church would want and everything, but you can't. I don't think you can fake it.
I don't think you can either.
There was a
Um,
line you probably saw in the book that came from a detective named Jim McGowan, who's also the detective I spoke with that first night. But sometime later on, okay, so when he does his interviews, like he did the day of the murder, he said this to me in a phone call some years later, just a few years ago. He said, every time I interview somebody after a murder, I walk away and say, why did that person do it? Did they do it because something precious was taken away from them? Did they do it because they were on drugs and they didn't know what they were doing? They were just flailing and someone else got in the way. Um, they needed the money that badly, whatever it is. And he said about this guy in these words, and I put these in the book, he's evil. He's just pure evil. This
yeah.
guy is pure evil.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I was shocked by that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this detective is a very deep guy. I really got to know him.
Well, and he's witnessed a lot of things. So for him to make that evaluation, um, that feels very powerful too. It feels like it means something coming from him.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, because we had kind of talked about this a little bit, but in the 19 days before her death, Nick sent Kristin an email that you now say was full of warning signs. And in response to her email, telling you things like Nick is acting really jealous. He kept calling and not trusting me all day. Nick is really annoying. It's hard to deal with someone who seemed to be getting more and more controlling and not giving space to me. Your email back to her, you say you tell her to reassure Nick that he's important to her, and the fact that he's a little jealous is a good thing, and just be honest with him and it should work out. And the first thing I want to say about these emails, which you have in the book, for anyone who buys this book, you'll be able to read them there. I was so struck by how close you were. These were emails being exchanged well into the night. This was not, this was like you guys going back and forth, like old friends, like, the most trusted people. Like it was just, I was so struck by how close you were. And then the other thing was your advice to her sounds very reasonable, like reasonable parent advice to me. But tell me what it is that you would do differently now.
Well, you go back to the book after I put all that. I put what was in the emails, literally what was in the emails,
Yeah.
and I forget exactly right now without the book in front of me how I characterize myself, but it's sort of like, this, gee whiz, what a nice dad, kind of stuff I wrote, and it'll be, it should work out, it should be just fine, this type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And but that's just naivete, in that case, because I didn't know about dating violence, and I didn't know, really, I couldn't fill a thimble with what I knew about domestic violence. But knowing what I know now, they're right out of the classic list of warning signs about controlling and dominant behavior, and people who are extremely jealous and possessive, and people who are constantly texting, which he did quite a lot, and constantly
Mm-hmm.
calling her and doing things like that and checking up on her. But I just didn't know any better. And I would say that 9.5 out of 10 dads probably would have written a similar email to my
Yeah.
daughter under those circumstances. It's like, I mean, it's not, I mean, if you had somebody sit next to you saying, these are the warning signs of domestic violence and dating violence and unhealthy behavior, by the way,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and she could wind up getting killed tonight.
Mm.
And
So,
honestly, if I were
mm,
sitting next to somebody who had that email today, I'd come right out with it. I'd say, I know you're going to think this is really dramatic and this is ridiculous, but I mean, I've done that many times. I've verbally shaken people up and said, this could be a lot worse than you think it is.
yeah. But what
So
would you have done? What action would you have taken
if I knew better, you mean?
if you knew better?
Well, I would have stopped the emails and would have called her and
Mm-hmm.
say, and then what I would have done, the key to knowing what to do is, of course, educate yourself, like learn the warning signs, and something I call the template every abuser uses. But I have a lot of those things in the book, and I do talk about them a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But what you want to do is you want to get that person to talk. So if I knew what I was doing and I didn't, I would have called her and said, "Well, tell me about, what happens, what makes you think he's acting jealous? Um, what do you in your mind think is controlling behavior?
Mm-hmm.
What would not be controlling? Like, what is he not allowing you to do?
Right. Right.
So
So you
but
would
yeah,
ask her to elaborate, get those details,
yeah, yeah. The key is
because
to ask
yeah.
leading questions.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, in doing it properly, you would come off sounding like a psychologist. Well, how
Right.
does that make you feel? Well, how
Yeah.
often does that happen? Well, do your friends see this behavior? You'd say those questions, which would have been great questions, because believe me, her friends saw everything, and they
Mm.
wanted to do some version of an intervention that weekend, but she was killed on a 3 a.m. on a Friday. So,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying
Wow.
the intervention would have done the trick, but maybe so. I mean, she was in the throes of breaking up, and she got his key and his security card for the building away from him
Mm-hmm.
that day.
Yeah.
But yeah,
um Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think that's so important. I think um, that we have all, not just even as parents, but as friends, had those conversations with our friends and not pushed it because we don't want to be seen as too dramatic or assuming anything or trying to make the other person look bad, um,
Yes.
or the potential abuser look bad. We don't want to alienate the person we're talking to, right? So we want to
Yes.
candy coat it so that, or just not make a big deal out of it, even when our intuition is telling us, no, something's wrong here.
Yes, and I haven't had a lot of practice in that area, because my one and only daughter is not here.
Yes.
But what I tell people to do, and a lot of it is from talking with domestic violence counselors and domestic violence directors of agencies and reading books and all the things and going to seminars. But besides asking the leading questions, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get that person to arrive at a conclusion on their own that this
Hmm.
relationship is not good for them.
Right.
And
Right.
I liken it to alcoholism from the standpoint of the person who is doing it has to bottom out. They have to
Hmm.
finally get to the point where they look into themselves and say, I can't do this anymore, or they won't stop. The person in that relationship has to say, I can't do it with this person anymore. This is not working out. This is not what I pictured. This is not what I want.
Yeah.
And then they have to get out safely, which is a whole other trick that needs some help. It needs
Yes.
coaching. You have to have an escape plan. And we haven't even touched on that, but that's important
Right.
too, especially if somebody's that controlling, like this guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Kristin did the classic thing wrong, which was break up with him alone in her apartment at night after a long day.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
nobody wants to have that news delivered to them,
No.
at midnight or beyond. I'm breaking up with
No.
you, and you know,
And
you're out
not
of
by
my life,
yourself. Yeah, you
and
want to
not by
do that
yourself.
with people, for
Right,
sure.
right,
um okay, so you also wrote this: after this horrible man was put away in prison for only 15 to 20 years, we decided we needed to decide whether to think only about us, and this is you and your wife or your
right.
family,
Yes.
or think about other parents who might befall the same fate. So you decided to do speeches and spread awareness and education about dating violence. You've made over 100 speeches before high schools, colleges, community groups, police organizations, and domestic violence agencies. First of all, thank you for that service. That
Wow,
is
it's very
incredible
nice. Thank you.
service. Yeah,
Yeah.
and um, I, I I really admire that you took this tragedy and used it as an opportunity to educate other people so that it wouldn't happen in our families or in their families. Not everybody's able to do that, so that was just one of the many things I was struck by in your book. But can you give us the stats on dating violence, murder? Just tell us how many women can expect to become victims of dating or domestic violence.
Yes, I can. It's really the only statistic I use, and I learned the hard way from listening to other people give talks that if you load an audience up with statistics, you lose them.
Mm-hmm.
So I only use one, and that is that 1 in 3 women will experience serious physical harm at the hands of an intimate partner at some time in their lifetime. And it typically happens between the ages of 16 and 24 years of age. So when
Okay.
you look at your high school kids and you look at college kids, then that's the ground zero for it. However, I've met people who I mentioned 16 to 24. I've had female freshmen in high school come up to me and say, here's what's been going on with my boyfriend, or here's what was going on. And I've talked with people, my God, who were in their 60s, married,
Mm-hmm.
not dating, of course, but who experienced abuse for 30 or 40 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It is
that's
it is it is a silencer though, isn't it? The people keep quiet about it. There's shame attached to it.
yes, there's
Yeah.
embarrassment and there's shame, and a lot of people go it alone because of that reason. I
Mm-hmm.
know of people who were 2 girls who were in college their first year. They were twins, and they were very close, but they got rooms apart so they could meet other people in different dorms. And the one was beaten to death by her boyfriend, and the other one had no idea what she was going through, although some of her
Mm.
friends did, but her own twin sister did not
Right.
know what
Right.
was going on. So yeah, a lot of people just kind of go it alone, and they don't think to call domestic violence hotlines, and
Yeah.
you know,
And all.
and that's really where everybody needs to turn first, by the way, is find a local hotline or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which I can tell you quickly is 800-799 SAFE, safe.
Safe. Okay.
800-799 safe.
We'll
And
put that
they're
in our
there.
show notes too.
Yes, they're there
Yeah.
24/7, and they're terrific. And if someone's afraid to make that call, maybe they
Mm-hmm.
ask one of their friends to sit in with them. You can always hang up. They're not going to send a SWAT team to your house if you say
Right.
certain things, so
Right. That's good to know, actually, because a lot of people don't know that. They think because there's that law that when you show up for domestic violence re, reporting that someone needs to go to jail, you have to make an arrest. And I don't know if that's everywhere, but I know it's in California.
no, I didn't know that, honestly.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I'm
there's
surprised.
a
That's
fear.
strong. That's strong.
Well, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
they're
things
they're
have
not just
changed quite a
leaving.
lot. Yeah.
Hmm? No, go
I was going
ahead.
to say things have changed quite a lot. There was a time when 911 calls were only really there to direct police to go to a house, or in the domestic case. And now those tapes are held up as being at the highest level of evidence in a
Yes.
case,
Yeah, they are.
because they look at it like that call was made just after something happened, where someone's
Mm-hmm.
yelling into the phone, my husband threw a lamp at me and kicked the cat and tried to
Yeah.
choke me or something. So
Mm-hmm. Um, so as people are listening to this interview, where it will be approaching June 3rd, which is
yes.
the anniversary of Kristin's death. You were quoted as saying that June 3rd is always a test, and that you'll be glad to see the sunrise the following day. Is it the same for you this year as it always is?
It will be the same. May 14th is the date on which she graduated. So, I that's about when I start to feel it coming.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but yeah, June
Okay.
3rd's tough. We don't do much on June 3rd except visit the grave. Uh, but it's an endurance thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's an endurance thing. It's different. People say, "What's it like now versus in the beginning?" I mean, I don't. In the beginning, you cry every morning. And you turn on the cry and you turn it off almost immediately. It's really weird. I've never had that before.
Mm.
You can just go into this place and all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, you're fine breathing normally. So the tears aren't the same.
Yeah.
I always tell people it hurts as bad, but it just hurts differently, because now they're just the pangs of loss. All of her friends that got married or had kids, or they've all, my God, it was 17 years ago. And
Mm-hmm.
in this house, we're kind of in this time warp situation where we're still kind of like missing Kristin, and in
Yeah.
the meantime, her brother got married. So that was fabulous 2.5 years ago. And, things have happened, but yeah, it's very painful, and
Mm-hmm.
it did need to happen. It was, and you can't help but separate the way it happened from missing her. That
Mm.
you don't want something that horrible to happen to anybody, and yet it happened to your own child, who you were there from 9 months before she was born.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's tough, but that's really why the When Dating Hurts book was written, so that
Mm-hmm.
people get caught up in the story. They, like you did, see themselves in the story, learn what to do, learn who to
Mm-hmm.
call, learn how to detect this, and then really find ways to hand the book to their kids or read parts together. Some people do that.
Yes.
Some
Yeah.
people prefer the audiobook. There's the audiobook, there's the
Mm-hmm.
paperback, there's the ebook, and now there's the podcast with 40 episodes. And they're all called When
Yes.
Dating Hurts, and it's all on whendatinghurts.com. So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Well,
easy to find.
that was actually going to be my last piece that I was going to talk about, and you just did it for me. I was going to talk about, you wrote the When Dating Hurts book. Last year you launched the When Dating Hurts podcast with
Yes.
40 episodes. That's great. I listened to a few before we talked, and you talk with these survivors. It's really good. You're a great interviewer. And then you published the When Dating Hurts audiobook this year, right? In
Yes, I
January
did. Yeah, just in
2022.
January, a few months ago.
Yeah. Just say it one more time where people can find you.
Well, the easiest place to get to me or get to information about what I'm doing is to go to whendatinghurts.com.
Right.
It's just that easy. And you can get to the book through there. You can find ways to get to all the podcasts. You can click something and just listen to it right there.
It's great. That's what
So,
I did.
yeah, good. Yeah, well,
Yeah, it
then
worked.
you,
Your website's good. It really does. It houses everything and it makes everything really easy to find, and you can read stuff and you can listen and it's all right there. So the link for it will be in our show notes, the show notes of this episode, wherever you're listening to it. And Bill, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on to tell your story. I Like I said, I it was so powerful for me as a mom and a bonus mom. Um, and I will be sharing it with people. I'll be sharing this episode with people who I believe will benefit from it as well.
yeah, that's the key thing is that once you get caught up in that story and you can see how to take it forward to help others, that's it. It was never really written. It wasn't written to make money. It was written really because I knew this would be happening to other people. I was trying to keep the number as low as possible. So
Yes.
that's really
Yes.
it. That's
Thank
that's
you.
where I get my energy. I feel like I'm racing all the time
Yeah.
to get things done and get podcasts done because those stories keep coming, and I'm just trying to
Mm-hmm.
dial that number down.
Yeah.
It just makes me so sad every time you hear another incident of somebody who paid for a bad relationship, an unhealthy relationship, and they didn't know it when they were in it. So
Yeah.
yeah, but
Thank you.
thank you for bringing me on. I appreciate this very much, both you and Scott. Thank you. Hi, I'm Bill Mitchell, and I'm the only one in the room who lost his daughter to dating violence.